Hello. How's everyone doing? Can you hear me okay? How's the volume? Just tested it, but it should be good. Let me know if I need to go any higher up. Cool. So I am picking up on the painting that I started yesterday. I worked on it a little bit last night. I redid some of the buildings back here. Did a little bit of more line drawing on top. Just to answer everyone's questions right off the bat, this is going to be recorded, so I'm uploading everything to YouTube after the fact, which takes a little bit of time, but hopefully by the end of the day, day 2 should be up. Day 1 is up, and it should actually, here, let me post, see if that works. Yeah. Okay, so all of my links are here, and then that should hopefully repeat every couple minutes. But yeah. Awesome. Thank you all for being here. Let's get started on this painting. So I figured today what I really wanted to work on is blocking in the leaves in the background. Last night I also blocked in the archway, like so. And then I'm gonna leave out the trellis for now, this like crosshatchy stuff, until I actually have the leaves in, because that'll cover some of it up. Cool. Let's just get started. I was gonna start on some of these pumpkins on the right. And just kind of show you, like when I block in, it's really kind of, it's not very exciting. I try to use like a little bit more clean brushes, but that have a little bit of texture on the edge. So I've also put all my liner on in a group, so I can just toggle it on and off. But you can see like the block in is very, you know, it's not very exciting. So I'm going to start by kind of figuring out the local color of these pumpkins. And one thing I also figured out last night is like the color of the sky and the lighting. So this is meant to be morning light, and so the sky is like kind of crisp blue, like a little bit leaning towards purple. And then the lighting in the scene is going to be yellow, gradiating out into orange, and then pink at the top, kind of like the morning sky. And then there should be a lot of light shining through these leaves when I'm done. So I think for the pumpkins, I'm gonna stay in the warm colors. Like I want them to all be kind of like warm yellows and reds and not too many green, even though that's definitely a thing in real pumpkins. And I have this block-in brush. It's kind of like a big piece of like chalk or something. You can see it's got a little texture. And then I have one that has color variants on it, so I can literally like select a color, and as I paint, it changes color, which I find to be super helpful for just coming up with, like especially for painting foliage or something more natural. Kind of gives you something random. Turn off my line layer for a sec. And let's work on some leaves as well. So obviously this green is not very realistic for leaf colors. I'm really gonna be making up my own colors, but when I do 3D, I like to just put in like a generic green color basically. But in nature, because leaves have so much, you know, they have a different color when the light's shining through them than their local color. They have a lot of subsurface scattering. And they also have like a very cool specularity. So it's just something to keep in mind. And I'm kind of, basically I'm gonna paint like a little swatch of leaves and then try and duplicate it back in space. And so I like to paint the kind of the shadow color of the leaves first. And then I'll paint the light shapes on top. Yeah, I actually can't remember where this brush came from. It could have come from Shadi Safadi, David Levy, or possibly Shiyun Kim. Those are the main kind of sets that I use, but then basically what happens is you take the texture, and over time I've like changed the, you know how there's dual brush? I've like completely changed the texture as well as the shape, so then I don't even know whose brush is whose anymore. Which is kind of why I'm hesitant about selling my brushes. It feels kind of like, you know, they kind of belong to somebody else. And I've either like paid for them on Gumroad or downloaded them through their website. But I also really like the Kyle Webster brushes. All of my smudge tools are from the Kyle Webster watercolor pack, which I think is super handy. I'm gonna put the leaves behind the pumpkins, because then there's definitely gonna be some overlaps. Like I don't want the pumpkins to be like completely in front of the leaves, but yeah, I'm not gonna worry about that too much yet. I'm just kind of getting in like rough scale and location. And then one thing I wanted to pull up was my mood board, because there's some really good information about how pumpkin leaves actually trellis when they're on the vine. This one and this one. So this program, by the way, is PureRef. Yeah. So look how cool this is. I just really like how towards the bottom the leaves are kind of like facing like this way, and then they kind of rotate as they go up, which is a really good way to show form. I wish this image was higher res, because I would show you how to use textures from it, but you can see there's like a ton of artifacts in it, so I definitely wouldn't use like a photo like this for a photo texture, even if I was stylizing it, which sometimes I use like paint daubs just to get like an initial block in. So I'm gonna keep this up in my other window. So up here, they're gonna be more like pointing, like up, and a little bit smaller because we're decreasing in scale as I go upwards. And this is like that really gross part of the painting where you still have 3D. And so it like, you know, it's like a very much a dissonance between the painterly style, the sketches, the really crisp 3D. So that's just something that we slowly work out. And I'm just leaving in, for my own reference, I'm leaving in like little gaps where the, what's it called? Where the trellis is. So yeah, I hope directionally this feels right. Oh yeah, and you can see, so yesterday I made a couple compositional changes where I just like scaled up the painting. I changed these wrought irons so that they wouldn't be quite as distracting because they're an element at the bottom of the painting. I don't want them to be so detailed that your eye goes straight to them. You know, right now they're pretty much solid black, but eventually they'll have shading and be like a little bit less distracting. Leaves are one of those things that are just really enjoyable to paint. Cool, so that's most of the kind of the shadow color. But I might actually go even darker than that in some areas just to add some depth. So I changed the blending mode of my paintbrush to behind just to quickly, it like basically saves me from making a new layer, if that makes sense. Just because I'm being lazy. And so that basically like lets you paint behind the brush strokes that already exist. And then I'm going to use my smudge tool. So these are the Kyle's watercolor brushes, which I think are really, like, look at that. Amazing. They just have such a good like texture when you smudge, and it also actually kind of smudges exactly the way you want them to. Sometimes when you use the smudge tool, it's like really random. Okay, cool. So this is mostly pretty done. Just kind of crisping it up. Okay, cool. Yeah, the 3D was built in Blender using Eevee as the plugin, and then also Dynamic Sky for lighting, which is a free plugin. Okay, so basically what I'm thinking about for lighting, you can see, so the light is coming through from, I'll draw a diagram really quick. So the lighting is coming from over here off camera. I'm basically pointing through the trellis and at this wall, if that makes sense. So like we have our light shape is here, the lighting direction is coming from over here, and then it's meant to be going through the leaves. So it's going to be really dappled where they're sitting. So I like to do, I'm gonna save this, make a new layer, and then do a clipping mask for the light shapes of the leaves. And I think I'm gonna go with a more cool tone. So I like to kind of color pick my sky just for, just to see what value it's at. And I can also do this to double check my values. This is really helpful. I should probably show you this really quick. View, proof setup, custom. And then you switch the profile to working gray, dot grain, and press OK. And then now when you press Command or Control Y, instead of switching to CMYK, it switches to grayscale. That's more color accurate than just like making a black and white layer, like one of these. It's a little bit cleaner, and it also takes chroma into account. So I toggle that on and off all the time when I'm trying to check my values. Back to my block-in brush, and I'm just kind of, you'll see me glancing up, and I'm looking at the photo reference. And so you'll see the color is not right at this moment. I'm just kind of like coming up with lighting shapes. And then I'm also like erasing where there might be a shadow from another leaf. And I'm gonna kind of like draw in with the highlights where I plan on the lighting to be. Maybe let's warm it up. I'm trying to keep, basically what I'm gonna do is paint like all the leaves and where they're lit, and then I'm going to lock the transparency and do a gradient. You'll see. Hang tight. And then as we go up, because the leaves are going from facing down to here to being like upwards facing, the leaves up here are only going to have a little bit of rim light on them. Like so. Cool, so I'm gonna pick kind of a mid-tone color and just kind of like grad downwards. Yeah, you'll probably notice I really only use a few brushes. I have like some specialty brushes, like every now and again I need to add texture, and I have like kind of like a marbly texture brush and like grass brushes, like all these different things. But then in case they get sterile, I'm always like trying to paint into them a little bit more. So I mostly really just use like this block end brush. And then since up here, I want it to be a little bit darker. And maybe also a little bit cooler. I think I want most of the warmth to be targeted over by the bottom where all the sunlight is hitting. And yeah, for me with leaves, it's all about like the lost and found edges. So like crisp edges, like maybe here on the ends, but then we kind of lose that edge when we go here, like into the shadow. And same with these. I also try to kind of indicate the direction of the veins of the leaves, just so that they're not like flat. But I don't like go in and draw like every single vein, at least not for a while. For some of the foreground plants that might be necessary, but the thing is, like if you were doing this scene for work, like let's say this is a whole set for a biz dev environment, I might do like a big mood piece like this for the whole scene, but then later on I would actually go in and like do a design packet for the individual leaves, and I would like draw them in 3/4 view and explain the texturing and all this stuff. So these big paintings are really just for mood and like overall composition and like kind of proof of concept. Oh, I need to drink some coffee. I'm gonna read some questions too. Let's see. How far do you go when it comes to breaking down a scene? Very far. I can actually show you some stuff I did for Scoob. Here, let's see. Okay, so I think towards the end. Yeah, so you can kind of see here, even these I would probably go a little more detailed, but this is a good example. Yeah, you see how I kind of broke away the whole tree. I designed all of the leaves in Sketch, but then I also gave them like the surfaced example. So this should give them subsurface as well as specularity to pick from, even things like the color shifts. So like on these plants, they're supposed to be warmer in the shadow and cooler in the light. Yeah, so you can go into a huge amount of detail, especially for foliage, because it's a little bit hard to, it can be pretty hard to make foliage look natural, so we do go quite in depth when we're doing surfacing packets. Just chugging some coffee. You know how it is. And yeah, thank you for explaining the difference between concept art and biz dev, because it's really just a word, honestly. It's but people always ask, because like I really didn't know what it meant when I was in school. So I'm kind of drawing the underside of the leaves, but once again, this color is not set in stone. It's on its own layer. Books for design. I don't really know any books for design. Maybe I do and I'm not thinking of it. Peter Hahn's really good at design. Dynamic sketching is a really good one. Kind of drawing a blank. I didn't really read any. I read a lot of color and light books when I was in school, like specifically the James Gurney ones. And Alla Prima was good. Oh yeah, framed ink is great. That's a really good one. So yeah, I'm just trying to kind of clean up my light shapes really quick. So basically what I'm doing is you can see the physical brush strokes, so I'm just kind of like smudging to make it look like a solid shape. Cool. Yeah, and you can definitely see I zoom in and out a lot, so I'm sorry if anyone is getting dizzy from that. yeah, I'm kind of liking how these leaves look. Definitely still use some work, but it's a good block in. And then same thing here, I'm smudging things where I want it to look like there's a drop shadow. Because the main reason leaves have depth is because there's like lots of shadows and like little details and stuff like that. Cool. So let me lock transparency. Press that little checkerboard button. Yeah, and I'm gonna kind of come up with what I want the really hot sunlight color to be on these leaves. And then this is where I'm gonna get a little bit more detailed. Let's see. Bring out this brush. Yeah, I like this brush because it has like a soft and a really hard edge. You can see it's way darker or way more opacity on this side than it is on this side. So it kind of gets a really good natural effect when you're, it's good for like hair, leaves, trees, you name it. Oops, my Photoshop froze because of the smudge tool. That's life. And I'm also, once again, I'm kind of trying to emulate that there's drop shadows, like maybe this pumpkin is casting a shadow. With leaves, it's like no one's like gonna come in here and double check that your shadows are in the right place, but yeah. Helps it look more natural. So somebody asked about VizDev and like, should you go for that first? Yes, there are entry-level jobs in VizDev, so I wouldn't recommend, like a lot of people are like, oh, just do background painting first, but that's actually it's a different track. Like it's not, the skill set absolutely crosses over, but it's not necessarily like background painting is not entry level. It's like they're both two different jobs, and then there's entry level for both background painting and VizDev. Yeah, I got a job in VizDev as a junior at Real Effects, and was still doing like sets, props, even character costuming, like stuff like that. So yeah, I just recommend shooting exactly for the job you want. So if you know you want to work in VizDev, or if you prefer painting backgrounds like for 2D, yeah, just I would find people with that really similar job that you want and emulate what they're doing. Because even like the old route of like, oh, like become a PA and then weasel your way in, I don't know if that's really a thing these days. I haven't seen it happen, but I have seen people get jobs fresh out of school in VizDev. It's just usually a junior position. Cool. Let me grab some reference. Yeah, so for being in junior VizDev, just to bring that tab of scoob work up again. Let me show you. So I'll show you the kind of stuff that I was doing like really early on. I was doing stuff like this. So these are just like topiary designs with surfacing. These were painted over David Levy's 3D block-in. Yeah, stuff like this. This kind of stuff is really helpful to have in a portfolio, to just be like painting a set or some props in 3/4 view and then adding callouts, photo ref. You don't necessarily have to add photo ref to your portfolio. I think people can kind of gather what it's for. But yeah, doing things like designing plants is really good. That's often necessary at work, and if you know how to design plants, you will often get tasked to do them, which is pretty fun. And yeah, for this specific show, I was told that they needed a lot of color paintings, and so in my portfolio before that, I made sure to include a lot of like looser color paintings. Like you can see, these are a lot more painterly than I normally do, which was kind of the style of the previs of that show. But yeah, really loose, and just having a lot of paintings to show that you could do any lighting scenario. You don't have like a comfort zone, like you don't only paint blue skies or sunsets or nighttime with neon lighting or something like that. People just want to make sure that you're versatile enough that you could work on the style of show that they're on, but also that you have enough stuff in your portfolio to show that you could do props, environments, foliage, you name it. Which a lot of that can be done with story beats, but it's also really necessary to have some prop callouts and stuff like that. Okay, let's do the pumpkins. So I'm just kind of cleaning up the silhouette. And then I'm going to pull up reference. Mostly when I'm looking at reference, I'm looking at rendering reference. Like, I know what a pumpkin looks like in my head, but what does it look like in every lighting scenario? So this is giving me some good information. This one's a little low res. It's the problem with online reference hunting. This is actually, I think, better information because it's a really sunny, like bright sunny day, which is the scenario I'm working on. So I like how there's like a really crisp shadow right on the bottom of all of them. Basically, I'm going to render them all in just diffuse light, and then I'll be adding a really strong specular light if they're one of the pumpkins that's being hit by light in this little area. So I think I want to include some more yellows too. That's going to be a big part of this, is making sure everything feels random enough. That's one thing with natural or like foliage. You just need to make sure things feel as random as they are in the wilds. Like even in a manicured garden, things have some randomness because plants are they just do that. It's just how it is. So I'm picking kind of like a darker desaturated color because the lighting conditions around them, like there's a contrasty color behind them. So I feel like they would just turn a little dark. Maybe even getting like a little bit greenish in the shadow. And then I'm also going to try and incorporate some of the lines that are on the pumpkin. And then again with the lost and found edges, I'm kind of smudging out, like if this is the crack of like the little stripes on the pumpkin, then I leave this side sharp, but then I smudge this side. And I try and do that on everything just to build form. This one's more yellowy, so its shadow is going to be even more kind of greenish. You can see I'm doing a lot of guess and check of my brushes, like seeing if I like a brush more than others, like just figuring out which brush gets the job done better. Waiting for Photoshop to not crash. It's my life. Hi, Devin. Let's see, VizDev usually runs for about a year to 2 years. I've only ever been on shows for about a year to 2 years long, depending on how fast the production pipeline is. Now shows are taking they're like demanding more and more in less time, so that could be something that changes in the future. And then the cracks are going to look much deeper on the sides of the pumpkins because it's how they kind of turn the form. And you can see I'm also getting lighting information from this sphere, which is just hanging out and kind of, it's going to be painted over, but it's giving me like a little shadow, a little speck. Kind of nice to have. So I use soft brush sometimes just to get things like in that really quick place of like, kind of like not CG, but like, I don't know, almost CG. And then I go back and I cut into it so it doesn't look so digital, if that makes sense. For layers, I use as many as I need, but I also merge stuff. So like the count will get up into like the hundreds, but I'll like make, 10 layers to initially draw something out, and then I'll merge those as I've been working. So it's kind of deceptively like, seems like there's like 200 layers in the painting, but I've really just like been merging things as I go. And I'm even giving things like just a little bit of a top shadow because I imagine there's going to be leaves covering them eventually. So I just want to plan that out in advance of like knowing that there's going to be a little bits of overlap and like hiding the pumpkins. This one might not have as much because it's like pretty out in the open. But yeah, I'm just trying to think about like the drop shadows that I know I'm eventually going to want to paint in. And kind of like while I'm painting, incorporating just a little bit of texture because the pumpkins have that like built-in like color variance, like they're a little bit spotted. Basically a lot of these things I've figured out are like in the past I would like start painting something, I would be like, okay, render it first, then add texture, then add the specularity and things. But what I've realized is it saves a lot of time to just know that I'm going to eventually add texture, and then I just add it right off the bat with brushes or whatever. Oh yeah, someone is asking about keeping the whimsy. Yeah, that is something I think about a lot because things can get really sterile the more you render them. So I constantly have the sketch in a group, and I toggle it on and off. And then even just like making sure to zoom out every once in a while. Part of it is like increasing the whimsiness from the 3D because the 3D can be so sterile. So it's definitely something I've been, there's like a very much a push and pull to it. So somebody asked about color keys. I think it's good to have like a good mix of super loose color paintings that show kind of your like inner vocabulary of color palettes. But it's also good to have a few tighter paintings to show that you could do like a look up picture illustration. Like not everyone does that on the job, but it's an option. I've always been kind of more on the generalist side of things, so I try to like have some color keys, have some really tight look of picture paintings. Yeah. I'm just adding little extra gaps where I feel like I could actually have a couple more leaves. Okay, that's feeling pretty good. Let's look at some photos and decide if there's any more detail I want to add. Yeah, so you can see like even just looking at this like very blurry photo, you can see like the really crisp rim light here, but then again it gets soft as it goes into the back. So that's kind of what I'm trying to emulate in a very loose way. Oh yeah, so someone asked about brush strokes. Yeah, I think it was for a long time I was using like brushes that very much showed you the edge of the brush, if that makes sense. So like round brush, for example, you can always see that it's like brushy, if that makes sense. Whereas something like this, you can keep painting with it and it like doesn't show the edge, if that makes sense, so it doesn't look very digital. But one thing I do is when I'm painting, I'll do like a bunch of brush strokes and just keep undoing until I get the one I like. Same with painting plants. Like I try not to do like a bunch of stuff and then, oh, I'll erase it. But yeah, I try to do like confident brush strokes and like erase into them, if that makes sense. Or I smudge them. That's been ever since I got those smudge brushes from Kyle Webster. I've been really enjoying using them again. I have to use the smudge brush in little bursts or else Photoshop hates me. Sorry. Okay, cool. So now I'm gonna work on kind of warming up this area. So I want it to feel like morning light is really hitting it. So now I'm on that, we've got the lighting layer on top, and then I've got this like dark kind of base layer. I'm gonna make it very yellowy. And I'm just kind of like brushing it in and squinting. Cool. So that feels mostly right. And then I want there to be quite a bit of contrast between, like, just in this kind of area. So I'm gonna pick this color. I'm just kind of getting the tips of the leaves. Cool. Okay, let's take a quick break and then I will be right back. One moment. Okay, I'm back. Let's see. Okay, what next? So, looking at this painting, there's quite a bit to do. We got the pumpkins, we got the people. I'm trying to prioritize what I think people would want to see the most. I know a lot of people have asked about foliage because it's kind of like a mystery. It's also fun to paint foliage, so here I am. Cool, I think that's in a good place though for the block in. Oh, I do need to do the stems really quick on these guys. It's one of those things I know if I leave it to the last minute, it just feels like a big pain. So in real life, the stems are very thick, and these pumpkins would probably be so heavy that they would like break off the stem at some point. So they put these little like nets under them, but this is a magical world, so not doing that. They all are just weightless enough. It's fine. And I like how they have those little like curlicue things. But I might do that as a little finishing touch. And then they also kind of fade into green as you get away from the pumpkin. Cool. So basically what I'm relying on is this chunk of foreground information to kind of explain to the viewer, hey, these are what all the pumpkins look like, and then as your eye goes back in space, you don't care too much to see like a perfectly rendered pumpkin. Like we don't need the pumpkins back here to be perfect, but if they look good over here and it kind of takes your eye from here to here and then back in space, you kind of fill in the blanks. So I was thinking maybe let's block in this foreground really quick with the same kind of method I used over there. So I wanted to explain really quickly how I am lighting a really contrasty color like this in like the blue-green environment that it's in. So I'm kind of using the local color. I like the local color to still stand out since this is still daytime. We're still going to be seeing a lot of the orange. But I'm color picking from here, and then I'm kind of shifting towards the yellowy greens, but not all the way into green. And then I darken and desaturate. And the reason I like to use Hue Cube instead of the HSB sliders or any of the other sliders is I just like to pick the exact color. Like it's like you see the color and you click it instead of like messing with sliders, and for some reason that just like makes more sense in my brain. Nice. Photoshop. Freezing on the soft brush as usual. Okay, cool. Oh yeah, someone was asking about researching how stuff works. I do that all the time. I had to learn how cranes work for a show that I was on, which was like a backflip for my brain to do. Because I don't normally do like heavy machinery or anything, but I had to design a crane, and it's like, you know, you're in VisDev, like you're basically expected to design whatever is thrown at you. So I watch YouTube videos of how they work and cranes in motion, and just like Googled a ton of images of them and even like diagrams and stuff like that. And I was able to design it. So yeah, being in VisDev is like, even if you don't know how to design a vehicle, you're gonna have to learn on the job, basically. So I feel like, you know, there's a process for everything. Like, even if you've never painted a vehicle before, if you know how to design in general, you'll probably be fine. But yeah, I do a lot of researching of how things actually work to kind of understand how they move, because if you're designing for 3D space, you also need to be thinking, and if it's like a prop that someone's interacting with or the camera is spinning around, you need to kind of understand how it moves and operates. I've designed things in my personal time like orreries, which is the planetarium thing that spins around a circle. It's got the sun on top, and then there's like different gears. Even figuring, like studying things like that in your spare time, or like for a personal project, like, I don't know, design a contraption, design something that like really challenges you. Mechs are contraptions, if you think about it. You know, you could really get into the weeds of how mechs work and how all the joints move and things like that. So okay, so this is just kind of the rough shading, and then I'm going to add a little bit of texture. And then I'm also trying to remember that this pumpkin's belly button is like here. I don't know what it's called. It's like the belly button. It's the other side of the stem, because there's a stem side and then there's this. We're going to call it the belly button. Maybe there's a scientific name for it. Yeah, and in the wild, like, especially when things are growing naturally, things have a lot of like variation and discoloration and things like that. So I'm trying to just like incorporate that right off the bat. You've probably seen those pumpkins at the grocery store recently that have like all the like kind of gnarled bumps on it. So I'm not going that far, but I'm definitely trying to think about that. Cool, so let's definitely incorporate some bounce light on here. So I'm not gonna go to green for bounce light because that would make it feel like the pumpkin is made of chrome. But if I just slightly take this color that already exists, turn it a little more yellow and saturate it, now I have like a nice bounce lighty color. One day I'll organize my brushes, but today is not that day. And then now, oops. So you can see a lot of my work is like, you know, scrolling through the brushes, figuring out which one I like. Which could probably be solved if I ever organize my brushes, but I'm so like, oh, what if I need that brush though? I don't know. You never know. And so what I'm thinking is, right on this corner of this pumpkin, there would be like a little bit of specularity. just where the light is shining through the leaves. And like you can see, I do a lot of like painting the brush stroke, but then erasing out of it. And then I like how in some of the photo reference, there's this kind of like specular ring, even though it's gonna be decreased in this little area, there's still kind of this little ring of specularity that kind of like follows the ridges of the pumpkins, if that makes sense. So I'm kind of doing, I like to do like a little bit of a push and pull when I'm doing specular highlights of like painting a big swatch and then like really cutting out of it. And that's, I feel like that's like really the way to make rendering natural objects look a little more realistic and less digital. Sometimes when things are really like digital looking, like looks like you completely painted it with the soft brush, it can look a little like sterile for animation. Let's see. So for the specular highlight on the pumpkin, going a little yellowy. And sometimes I do a little troubleshooting too. Like I'll just like, well, if this was on its own layer, I would just hue sat and change the color of the specular highlight, but I painted it on one layer, so you know, here we are. Oh no, I didn't. Amazing. Okay. Nice. Cool, and then there's gonna be leaves covering this too. I'm gonna just clip that to that layer so I know that they're together. So Sunny asked if there, you know, I'm not really ever able to work traditional at work. I definitely had some production designers who would like, and character artists as well. I feel like it's pretty common that they'll do work in pencil first. Just like some character artists just really prefer pencil sketching, and that's like completely fine if that's your jam. Yeah, so like my production designer at Paramount would draw in pencil and then scan it, and then he would like touch them up digitally if needed, but usually they were like fine in pencil. It really matters, all it matters is if you can get the job done in pencil or ink or digital. It's totally okay to use a different medium. I would say the only thing for VizDev is it really does take longer to do a color painting in gouache than it does in digital. So I've never really been able to swing it, but maybe there's someone who still does. I'm not sure. Don't know what that is. Just delete that. Sometimes you do a block in and then you just like do it over. Yeah, I worked on this pretty late last night, so who knows what I was doing. And yeah, this is going to be recorded and on YouTube. Every once in a while, I have like a little chat bot that posts links. So if you scroll up, you can find my YouTube channel or socials and things like that. trying to think of the most tasteful way to block out this pumpkin. Basically just like, what are the best shapes? Like, what's the best way to lead the eye in? Because obviously if it's like this, it's like, look at this pumpkin. But if you do some overlaps, you can kind of like point the eye. So a lot of times with leaf shapes, I'm like guessing and then I fix it later. But I just want to get the gesture of like where the leaves are headed. Cool. So, oops, I accidentally drew a butt here. You know, that happens. I'm actually gonna do that behind layer. Oops. I have to do this a lot. I don't know if anyone else does, where you like Windows M or like minimize everything and then you come back to Photoshop because Alt gets stuck. It doesn't make any sense. Okay, so I'm actually gonna color pick from over here. So I try not to ever go all the way to black, like not like physically all the way over here, but I always like incorporate a little saturation. I also don't want my painting to get too dark in general. So like my levels this. Perfect. I'm also gonna do a quick hue sat and just kind of shift it. I think I want these to be a little cooler in light. I don't know. Painting green color is just kind of a push and pull of what feels right, because it's really easy to make leaves look too sterile or too like fake. Okay. And then as these leaves go up, they're more pointed upwards. Cool. Now to light them. So I think I want this leaf. Oh, I forgot I made 2 different layers. Okay, I'm just gonna go merge that. And then what I want is like little bits of dappled light coming in. And then like kind of up here, I think the light is going to be even more kind of glowy. Just so that it doesn't feel too dark. Like I don't want this tunnel to feel like a super dark hole. I just want there to be kind of a play of light and shadow on her face, so that she's kind of getting lit, but she's also a dark silhouette on this really light background. Cool. So let's get started on the character now. I'm just kind of deciding how bright I want all the line art so I can work under it. Ooh, let me also do the ground plane and the benches really quick, because that's one of those things that's easy to get lost. I'm just selecting that out. And then I'm gonna literally copy paste the 3D. So I just super copied it by pressing Control C and then Control Shift V to paste it where it's supposed to be. I have the grounds. Oh, it didn't paste in place. That's why this is so confusing. It keeps moving, but you know, that's fine. Good enough. Hi, Nina. So funny. Okay, and I'm gonna do the tables really quick too, just so that they're on their own layer, and then I don't have to think about painting over them. Come on, Photoshop. Okay, so there's those. Gonna do layer bare copy. Okay. And then I kind of want the floor to be terracotta to match the orangey pumpkins. So I'm just kind of like painting in. So this is basically imagining the floor with no lighting on it. I'm just kind of like doing local color and a little bit of the ambient occlusion. So like, of course, like over here is going to be way darker because there's a bunch of leaves right above it. And under the tables too. And then all those fun little slices of sunlight, I'm going to bring those back when I do the lighting pass. I'm just kind of like, it's still technically Balkan, so. And I want to include a little warmth, maybe not that warm, but like back where some of this skylight is leaking through onto the ground. Maybe more cool colored. Nope, definitely this way. Sometimes when I'm deciding to make colors cool or warm, it's like I'm deciding if I want to go this way on the color wheel or this way and desaturate. And it's kind of just a push and pull depending on the environment. One thing that helped me a lot with that was gouache painting. So I would just we had to practice mixing color a lot, and a lot of the big struggle with gouache painting is neutrals. But learning about neutrals has really helped me understand how to light things better in Photoshop. I definitely prefer Photoshop to Procreate just for the amount of tools that I use, and I'm also much more comfortable with Photoshop. But I love Procreate for when I'm traveling, and I love that it's an option, especially for like character artists, because it's so versatile and you can do so much in it. I just really need more layers. That's like my only thing. Like I said, even though I merge a lot of layers, I still use a lot in the early process. Like for example, this whole thing, when I was copy pasting the little areas, like I would make this one piece and then I would just copy paste it, and that can be kind of a slog on Procreate. I do not have to keep my layers organized or clean, thankfully, because I'm not a background painter or designer. I don't have someone that I'm going to be turning my PSD into. Not usually. Like sometimes I do graphic design or like illustration tasks at work, and I might have to submit a final PSD for that just so that it's high res and they can easily select like a graphic off of a background, if that makes sense. But yeah, when I'm working, I don't care about my layers. I just make a new layer and I move on with my life, and then I merge things. I merge and make new layers and copy paste stuff way too much to worry about naming things. But if I was ever handing this off to someone, I would, fix it up or at least group things in a way where they can grab stuff. The problem is a lot of Viz Dev has adjustment layers or atmosphere, so it's not always like you can just move stuff around. But that's why background painting is its own job. It's like a whole pipeline. Had to fix that pumpkin real quick. Cool, and then I'm gonna also, so like I said, this is just my block end of the trellis. The colors are super off. I just kind of like loosely picked a brown color and called it good. So I'm gonna lock transparency. I think I want more yellowish. Cool, so we're mostly getting, I feel like the colors are getting a little bit more there from the very sterile 3D. Let's throw on a quick adjustment and see how we feel. Sometimes you just add fog or something and you're like, oh, it feels better. So sometimes I like to use screen layers. Obviously that's crazy colored. So what I do is hue sat, and then I just darken and saturate it. And I might end up not using it all together. But yeah, nice. Favorite projects? Yeah, it's really hard to pick. I really liked the last project I was on, Rumble at Paramount. That was pretty fun. It's hard to pick because there's reasons why I like all the different projects differently. The team was amazing at Paramount for one thing, but it was also really good on Scoob. But on Scoob I never got to go into production because the story was rewritten when I was on it. Rumble was really fun to work on because I pretty much got to work on it until the end. And yeah, I really like the one I'm on now too, so it's really hard to pick. The one I'm on right now is unreleased, but it's at Netflix Animation. Just the team is super good. It's also a really cute project, so that's been fun. A lot of the like Scoob, dare I say, was like a little bit more gritty than what I'm working on right now. Like, gritty is not the right word, but like more realistic and like sci-fi adjacent in some ways. I'm using sci-fi lightly. It just had a spaceship or a hover jet. But and Rumble is like a monster wrestling movie, so lots of did a lot of machinery and equipment and like big giant scaled objects, which was really fun. They're like all 50 feet tall monsters, so they were the kind of objects that they would have to have in that world to fit the monsters. That was like a really fun scale challenge to work on. Okay, let me draw her bench really quick because she needs a place to sit just for posing. Like I drew her pose with the bench kind of in mind, but now I need to actually kind of think about the actual scale of that. Cool. So now you can see that I've actually put in the bench. Her body probably wouldn't even be touching, so I need to make her a little bigger. Let's see. I think it needs to come down to here. And then this book is freaking giant, so we're gonna make that smaller. Photoshop loves to give up during a transform. I don't know why. It's like ever since some of the newer versions, I reverted back to 21, but it's still just like doing Photoshop stuff. Cool. And then I need to go and hide some of the original sketches of her because you can see it's getting really messy. So I just delete. Cool. And now I'm going to redraw. Like I said yesterday, I redraw characters dozens of times. It's kind of, I treat it like doing like a gesture layer and then turning down the opacity and then just like drawing on top of that a dozen times. Sometimes I flip the canvas. So now I can kind of feel like if there's anything wrong, like it's like glaringly obvious if you flip the canvas sometimes. So yeah, like I'm even seeing like her shoulders too dropped. And now I'm also gonna do kind of not a diagram, but just like I'm drawing through her body just so I know where pieces land. Pieces, that doesn't sound great when describing someone's body parts. So this is kind of the center line of her body. And she's sitting here. So then her elbow So yeah, she needs to be even bigger still. Sometimes it's good when you're doing 3D to like throw in a 6 foot tall or 5 foot tall cube or something, just to like see how big people are. Or guess and check like I'm doing. So I'm gonna also scoot up her bench a little bit. So I use this white layer as like, that's like my tracing paper layer, and I just adjust the opacity thing as needed. Okay, so like when I'm thinking about how she's sitting, I'm thinking about her pelvis as like a box, basically. And I want her torso to have like a nice tilt to it. And her legs are gonna be like kind of in shadow, so I'm not, you know, she'll probably just be wearing something like dark jeans or something like that, just so it's not distracting. And then her elbow. So I like to think of people's elbow kind of stops like just where your pelvis starts. So if that's her pelvis, her elbow kind of stops here. And so if you draw an arc, you kind of get the points of her elbows resting. I'm just going to turn that down for clarity. And her collarbones, it's kind of a good center point indicator. And then I was thinking of having her hand, you know, when your wrist goes forward and so the hand kind of goes back like this. That's kind of how hers. So her wrist is like here. Yeah. And then it's a little straighter on this side and a little more curved out-y on that side. And then her hand's kind of going back. Perfect. Been having to get much more into drawing characters these days because I'm getting ready to draw a graphic novel, and that's going to be 1 million people in it. Help. Oh yeah, thank you, Sunny. I'm gonna be doing. I'm working on my outline for my graphic novel right now, and then I'm gonna try and kind of do some style tests for that. The outline's being worked on with my agent as well, who's really awesome. And yeah, so I'm just kind of like finishing up the story, and then once that's done, it's going to be going into like actually laying out all the pages. And then after that, it's going to be drawing every single panel, as you do. But yeah, the book is not going to look like this, like same style, but then it's going to be probably line drawing and like color flats or value flats. Okay. Turn that down again. And then I'm trying to make sure the head doesn't feel disjointed. Sometimes that can be a problem from redrawing it multiple times. It's just like, is the head still in the right spot? Like, is it on the right pivot point of the neck, you know? So because her hand and her head are kind of fused, not physically, but like they are fused together in this pose, so they kind of need to be together. I'm just warping both her hair and her hands. Cool. Maybe that's a little far off. Well, I can always fix it in paints. Usually I do like a quick line drawing, and then anything that I am not in love with, I kind of fix in paint, because a lot of things are revealed to me after I start blocking in the silhouette of her body. And so I'm going to do that with this white layer just so I can see the outlines. And you'll see me like blocking in like a really heinous color, but like ignore it because it's just the block in. So lately, for characters, I really just use a couple layers to draw them. And then I add layers as needed. Like sometimes I'll do the hair on its own layer if I'm trying to like tweak the color, which I'll show you. Gotta wait for my brush to catch up. I've seen some people complain about this to Adobe, and their response is to paint slower. I was like, I have work to do. It's just all these like little random like laggy things in Photoshop happening, and a lot of them are because of the hotkeys. Like you're using too many at once, and then they're just like overloading each other. Yeah, and so what I'm doing for her is what I'll do is kind of like paint her head to here, but then I'll mask it out for her hair. Or I'll paint her hair on top, and then I'll do another layer behind that's like the back of her hair. So like for example, you have the underside of your hair that goes behind the head, and then you have like the front strips that hang. So I just kind of like break it up that way. And then eventually I'll probably separate it or merge things is what usually happens. And then I'm not doing too much with her hand because because of just like the order of the layers, her body might have to be like torso on top of the table layer, and then underneath the table layer, her legs, just for like specifically all the overlaps and stuff like that. Okay. So her hair is it's like a blackish brown. So it's black in the shadow, but then in highlights, it's like a little bit more on the warm side. So I'm using this kind of like mid-tone yellow, and then gray. And hair is one of those things I like to tweak as I'm painting it. Just depending on how much I want to show specularity or not. And I'm just kind of thinking about the overall shapes. I might actually do her hair behind this layer and then just do the masking thing I was talking about. Since her hair is mostly in the background, I think that makes sense. And then I want to give her kind of a, bring the back of her head out just a little bit more. And then, like I said, this is where I'm gonna start like masking out some of her head where the hair is gonna be overlapping. And the reason I'm doing mask and not erasing is because I wanna be able to shade this. And then if I ever decide to change like how far in her hair goes, I can always change it in the mask. Or even if I want to add like little strands. So what I'll also do is kind of paint behind the head with this dark color. And then you can see, now I can edit it however I want. Like let's say I only want it to go to there, and then I want like some strands in front. I can easily do that now. Yeah, I'm definitely hoping to do more streams after this now that I know how. And I've had some people give me some really good tools and like moderator apps and things like that. I'm definitely thinking about streaming more because this is pretty fun. It's nice. Okay, cool. Cool, so she is blocked in, and then now I'm gonna start blocking in the local colors of her clothes and her skin. So, let's see. Heading a little more towards peach. I might even find like a really good similar color palette, what am I saying? Film screenshot that has like her similar skin tone and hair color, because that can give a lot of good color information. And I'll dig for that later. I won't make you guys sit on the stream for that. And then kind of thinking like what color is her skin in shadow without being too gray, because this is a very warm scene. Then underneath the table, gotta draw her legs. So I'm gonna just do like a super desat blue jean color. Maybe even in this light, it's more teal. I think that's something a lot of people overlook when painting jeans, is they make them like way too indigo blue, and jeans have like this almost like brown or cream colored cross stitching inside of them. So it's like you have the blue and then you have the kind of golden or like cream color, and it makes them actually look like this really strange blend of like almost like a teal color. Oh, that's awesome. We've got this thing blocking her legs, so I don't even have to paint them. Nice. It's the little things. And I might decide that I want her legs angled more in, kind of like she's like sitting on the bench, kind of sideways. And then, boom. Cool, so I think I'm almost at noon. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask and I can try and answer in these last couple of minutes. And then also the stream is going to be on YouTube, so stay tuned. The Lightbox website is going to be updating the links of all of the recorded demos, and then on top of that, I'm going to try and be adamant about posting them on my socials. And then also my YouTube channel is linked in the chat box, so you can follow that as well for updates. I can't promise Ethan Becker level quality of videos, but I'm definitely going to try and do this more. Focused and calm. Oh man, you haven't seen me driving. Painting is pretty relaxing for me. I mean, you know, it's definitely been a long journey. Like, it used to be that a scene like this and like this block in would feel really overwhelming. But I've just done it so many times, I kind of know what my end process is going to be. And so I don't stress out about it looking like shit in the very beginning. I just kind of like, okay, like I know I'm going to be able to paint this. And I know you just kind of have to break everything into parts. And just kind of view everything like a process. Like, the painting is not going to look finished in an hour. So how many hours is it going to take to, finish this side of the painting? And then how long is it going to take to do all the characters? And I kind of try and break things down into chunks to make it feel a little bit less, overwhelming. So her hair is kind of like I said, it's like raven black, but like if sun is shining through it, it's kind of warmish. But I'm also on the top of her head, I want to do a little bit of ambient, like basically this big hole in the tunnel is still going to allow a lot of ambient light in, and so the shadows and the light over here are going to be a little purpley. So then on top of this like ambient light we have that's kind of purpley, we have this like really yellowy specularity. And like I said, I like to kind of light things with diffuse light. Like basically imagine this speck layer is gone. That would be lit with just diffuse light, and then this specularity is now the direct light that's hitting it. So the diffuse light is all this like atmospheric light, like even on top of the table, it's this kind of like little bit lighter grayish color. That's because it's getting the ambient light of this sky. And then when I actually light it with the direct light, there's going to be like streaks of sunlight coming across the table, if that makes sense. And then same with over here. I just want to kind of block in this color before I go. So what I'm trying to get better at in my own process is like blocking everything into the same point. Because so often in the past, I would like render way too much of the foreground and then be like, oh shit, I got to do this whole background. So I'm trying to block everything in and then, you know, light things as I go, like kind of build things up as I go. But the goal is to like cover all of the 3D in this painting. So slowly but surely. All right, I think that's all the time I have. So thank you so much for joining. Definitely going to put this on YouTube later, and I'll keep you guys posted on that. And thanks for being here. Bye, everyone.